October 9, 2018. Emma had just finished another normal day at the dental clinic where she worked as a receptionist. She clocked out at 6:40 p.m., wished her coworkers good night, grabbed her purse, and walked into the parking lot behind the building. Before reaching her car, she pulled out her phone and sent a quick text to her mom. "Leaving work now. I'll be home by 7:30. Her mother, Linda, smiled when she read it. She replied with one word. "Okay." She had no idea she had just received the last message her daughter would ever send. Dinner was almost ready. Emma's favorite pasta was on the stove. Linda expected to hear the front door open any minute, just like every other weekday. But 7:30 came, then 7:45. "No, Emma." Linda wasn't worried at first. Traffic could be terrible after work, and Emma often took longer routes to avoid the freeway. By 8:15, she finally called. The phone rang, then voicemail. She left a cheerful message. "Hey sweetheart, just checking on you. Call me when you can." No reply. Half an hour later she called again. Straight to voicemail. This time she sent a text. "Emma, please call me." Still nothing. Around 9:30, Emma's younger brother, Ryan, came home. When he heard Emma still wasn't back, he immediately texted her himself. No answer. Now the house felt different. The food had gone cold. The television was still on, but no one was watching it. Every few minutes Linda walked to the front window, hoping to see headlights pull into the driveway. They never did. At 10 p.m., she called the sheriff's department. The deputy who answered asked the usual questions. How old was Emma? When was she last seen? Did she ever disappear without telling anyone? Linda answered every question. No, never. Emma wasn't the kind of person who ignored her family. She called her mom almost every lunch break just to talk about random things. A funny customer, weekend plans, or what they should cook for dinner. She always let someone know where she was. Always. The deputy tried to reassure her. "She's an adult," he said. "Most people in situations like this come home within a few hours." Linda thanked him. She hung up the phone. Then she sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at Emma's untouched dinner plate. Later, she would say something she could never explain. "I knew right then. I didn't know what had happened, but I knew my daughter wasn't coming home that night." She was right. At 11:20 that night, a security guard noticed a silver Honda Civic still sitting alone in the dental clinic parking lot. It had been there when his shift started. 5 hours later, it hadn't moved. Something felt wrong. He called the police. When deputies ran the license plate, the car belonged to Emma Carter, the woman who had already been reported missing. Minutes later, Linda and Ryan arrived at the parking lot. The car was locked. Everything looked normal. Emma's reusable water bottle sat in the cup holder. A library book rested on the passenger seat. Nothing was broken. Nothing looked disturbed. It was as if Emma had walked away for just a moment, planning to come right back. But she never did. Investigators immediately searched the parking lot. There were no signs of a struggle. No dropped belongings. No blood. Nothing. It was like Emma had disappeared into thin air. Then detectives noticed something. A security camera mounted on the back corner of the building faced the parking lot. If anything had happened, that camera might have seen it. The footage was pulled immediately. Everyone in the room watched in silence. At 6:43 p.m., Emma walked through the back door carrying her purse. She smiled at someone inside before the door closed behind her. She walked toward her car, reached into her bag, and looked for her keys. Everything looked completely normal. Then, a dark blue van slowly entered the parking lot. It wasn't driving like someone looking for a parking space. It was crawling, watching. The van stopped beside Emma. The side door slid open. The camera angle couldn't clearly show what happened next. There was a brief movement, then Emma disappeared from view. 40 seconds later, the van drove away. That was it. No screams. No chase. No witnesses. Just 40 terrifying seconds that changed one family's life forever. And at that moment, No one knew this was only the beginning of something far more terrifying. The security footage changed everything. What started as a missing person case suddenly became something much darker. Detectives replayed the video over and over, hoping they had missed something. They zoomed in on the van. Nothing. The image was too blurry to read the license plate. The driver's face couldn't be seen. The only thing investigators knew for certain was that Emma had vanished in less than a minute. Someone had planned this. By sunrise, flyers with Emma's picture were everywhere. Her smiling face covered telephone poles, store windows, gas stations, and community bulletin boards. Friends shared her photo across social media. Local news stations picked up the story. Everyone wanted to help. But every lead ended the same way. Nowhere. Police interviewed everyone who knew Emma. Her co-workers, her friends, her neighbors, even her ex-boyfriend. Nothing stood out. Emma wasn't involved in drugs. She wasn't in debt. She had no dangerous relationships. No one could think of a single person who wanted to hurt her. Her phone records didn't reveal anything unusual. Her social media looked exactly like any other young woman's. Pictures with friends, family birthdays, coffee dates, weekend plans. There wasn't a single warning sign. That terrified detectives, because it meant one of two things. Either Emma had been chosen completely at random, or whoever took her had been watching her for a long time without leaving a single clue. While police searched for answers, Linda refused to sit at home. Every morning she woke up before sunrise. Every day she drove through Riverside handing strangers a flyer with her daughter's face on it. She knocked on doors, visited shopping centers, stopped people in parking lots. Anyone who would listen, anyone who might have seen something. Ryan did the same. He barely slept. His bedroom slowly filled with stacks of missing person posters. Whenever a phone call came in, he would grab his keys and race across town, hoping someone had finally found Emma. Every single time, it was another dead end. One caller claimed she'd seen Emma at a gas station nearly 50 miles away. Security cameras proved it wasn't her. Another person reported seeing the blue van parked behind a shopping center. Police rushed there. Wrong van, wrong driver, wrong place. Hope kept appearing, only to disappear hours later. 3 weeks passed. Then one detective noticed something strange. His name was Mike Reynolds. He had worked missing person cases for years, and something about Emma's disappearance kept bothering him. Felt familiar. He started digging through old case files from nearby cities. Hours turned into days. Then he found it. 17 months earlier, a 22-year-old warehouse worker named Ashley Brooks had disappeared after leaving work. Her car had been found in the parking lot. She had simply vanished. 8 months later, another woman, Jessica Flores, disappeared from a shopping center parking lot. Again, no witnesses. No signs of a struggle. Then Mike noticed one detail buried deep inside both reports. Several witnesses had mentioned seeing a dark blue van. His heart started racing. He kept searching. Another case. Another parking lot. Another young woman. Another dark van. Then another. 5 women. 5 disappearances. All within driving distance of each other. All taken during the early evening. All while walking alone to their cars. None of the departments had connected the cases because each city handled its own investigation. Looking at them separately, they seemed unrelated. Looking at them together, it looked like someone had been hunting women for years. Mike carried every file into his supervisor's office. He spread them across the desk without saying a word. His supervisor looked at the dates, the locations, the similarities. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. Finally, he reached for the phone. "We need the FBI." Within days, federal agents joined the investigation. One experienced profiler reviewed every case. When she finished, she didn't hesitate. "This isn't random." She pointed to a map covered in colored pins. "The parking lots weren't chosen by accident. They're quiet. They have limited camera coverage. And every victim was alone during that short walk to her car." She paused. Whoever did this has practiced. The room fell silent. No one wanted to say what everyone was thinking. If this person had done it 5 times, how many victims had never been connected? And more importantly, was Emma still alive? Linda asked investigators that same question every single time they called. Every single time, the answer never changed. We're still looking. Those 3 words became the hardest thing a mother could hear. Because they weren't good news. But they weren't the worst news either. They meant she had no choice, except to keep waiting. Nearly 3 months passed. The search never stopped. Neither did Linda. Every morning she woke up hoping today would be different. Every night she went to bed with the same unanswered question. Where is my daughter? Then, in January 2019, everything changed because of a missed payment. Not a witness. Not a new security camera. Not an anonymous tip. A missed payment. A self-storage facility about 30 miles away was preparing to auction off one of its units after the owner stopped paying the monthly rent. It was routine. The manager unlocked the door, expecting to find old furniture or boxes. Instead, he froze. The small storage unit looked like someone had been living inside it. There was a sleeping bag in one corner. Empty food containers scattered across the floor.
Un portable toilette.
And bolted to the concrete wall. Pair of metal restraints. The manager immediately backed out. His hands were shaking as he called 911. Police arrived within minutes. The moment detectives stepped inside, they knew this wasn't just an abandoned storage unit. It was a crime scene. Forensic teams spent 2 full days collecting evidence. Every surface was tested. Every object was photographed. Then the lab results came back. The first DNA match belonged to Emma Carter. Detectives stared at the report in silence. Emma had been inside that storage unit. She hadn't disappeared into thin air. Someone had kept her there. Then another DNA match appeared. It belonged to one of the other missing women. Then another. 3 victims. 1 storage unit. Now there was no doubt. The disappearances were connected. Linda received a phone call later that afternoon. She answered before the first ring finished. It was Detective Mike Reynolds. His voice sounded different, more serious. We found something. Linda stopped breathing. Is she alive? There was a long pause. We don't know. Those 3 words hit just as hard as before. Mike carefully explained what investigators had found. Emma's DNA inside the storage unit. Evidence that she had been held there. But there was something else. The unit didn't look like a place where someone stayed for months. It looked temporary, almost like a stop along the way. That single detail gave investigators something they hadn't had in weeks. Hope. If Emma had been moved, then maybe, just maybe, she was still alive somewhere. Linda held onto that thought with everything she had. Police quickly tracked down the person who rented the storage unit. His name was Daniel Brooks, 41 years old, worked as an air conditioning repair contractor, lived alone, quiet, friendly enough that most neighbors barely noticed him. No criminal record, no history of violence. Nothing about him stood out. But one detail immediately caught investigators' attention. He owned a dark blue Ford van, the same type seen outside the dental office. The same type witnesses had mentioned in several other disappearances. Detectives wasted no time. The next morning, they surrounded Daniel's house with search warrants in hand. But something was wrong. His truck was parked outside. The lights were off. No one answered the door. They forced their way inside. The house was empty. His clothes were gone. His van was gone. His phone had been switched off days earlier. He had disappeared just before police found the storage unit. Someone had tipped him off, or he had realized the missed payment would eventually expose him. Either way, he was already running. Inside the house, investigators uncovered something horrifying. Hidden beneath the bed was a locked metal box. Inside were 5 driver's licenses. Each one belonged to a missing woman. Ashley, Jessica, Emily, Rachel, and Emma. Linda wasn't told about the licenses right away. Detective Reynolds wanted to tell her in person. No mother should hear something like that over the phone. Instead, he called with only one message. "We know who we're looking for." For the first time in months, the investigation had a face. But while detectives finally knew the hunter's name, no one knew where he had gone, or whether Emma was still with him. The race had just begun. Because every hour Daniel Brooks stayed free, the chances of finding Emma alive grew smaller. For nearly 2 months, police searched everywhere. Every highway camera, every motel, every abandoned building. Every lead that came in was checked. Nothing. It was as if Daniel Brooks had vanished along with Emma. Then, in March 2019, a routine traffic stop changed everything. An Arizona Highway Patrol officer was checking vehicles at a roadside rest area when one van caught his attention. Dark blue, old model, out-of-state plates. The officer ran the license number through the system. Within seconds, his computer flashed a warning. Wanted. Felony warrant. Do not approach alone. The officer quietly stepped back and called for backup. Minutes later, several patrol cars surrounded the van. Daniel Brooks never tried to run. He didn't fight. He didn't argue. He simply opened the door, stepped outside, and held out his hands. It was almost as if he knew this day would come. The officer ran the license number through the system. Within seconds, his computer flashed a warning. Wanted. Felony warrant. Do not approach alone. The officer quietly stepped back and called for backup. Minutes later, several patrol cars surrounded the van. Daniel Brooks never tried to run. He didn't fight. He didn't fight. He didn't argue. He simply opened the door, stepped outside, and held out his hands. It was almost as if he knew this day would come. Investigators believed the nightmare was finally over. They were wrong, because Daniel refused to speak. For 4 straight days, he sat in the interrogation room without saying a single word. Detectives questioned him for hours. Nothing. FBI agents tried. Nothing. He stared at the table, sometimes at the wall, never at the people asking questions. Then, on the 5th day, he finally spoke. "I'll tell you everything." The room went silent. "But only if we make a deal." Investigators didn't care about his excuses. They wanted one answer. "Where is Emma?" Daniel leaned back in his chair. Then he said something that made every person in the room freeze. "I don't have her anymore." Detectives looked at each other. "What do you mean?" He answered without emotion. "I sold her." For several seconds, no one said a word. The meaning slowly sank in. Emma hadn't been kidnapped by one monster. She had been handed over to someone else. As Daniel continued talking, the case became far bigger than anyone had imagined. He admitted he had been stalking women leaving work. He chose places where people were distracted. Parking lots, shopping centers, office buildings. He watched them for days, sometimes weeks. He learned their routines. He knew exactly what time they left work, exactly where they parked, exactly how long they would be alone. By the time he made his move, he already knew everything he needed. The kidnapping itself usually took less than a minute. The hardest part wasn't taking them. It was making sure no one noticed until he was already gone. Then came the worst confession. The storage unit wasn't where the victims stayed. It was only a temporary stop. After a few days, or sometimes a couple of weeks, he transferred them to other people. People willing to pay large amounts of money. He gave investigators names, phone numbers, meeting places, even addresses. The FBI immediately launched raids across several states. Homes were searched. Storage buildings were opened. Several suspects were arrested within days. Each arrest led to another. Every answer uncovered even more questions. Investigators realized they weren't dealing with one criminal. They were uncovering a hidden network. A network that had been operating for years without anyone connecting the dots. But none of that mattered to Linda. Every time Detective Reynolds called, she asked the same question. "Did you find Emma?" Every time, he had to give the same answer. "Not yet." One afternoon, Linda finally broke down. I don't care about the network. I don't care how many people are involved. I just want my daughter. Detective Reynolds lowered his head. He had investigated crimes for almost 20 years. He had heard families cry. He had watched parents lose hope. But there was nothing he could say that would ease a mother's pain. So he told her the only thing he honestly could. We're getting closer. And for the first time, he truly believed it. Daniel's information led investigators to a house in Nevada. They moved in before sunrise. Armed agents surrounded the property. The front door was forced open. Every room was searched. The suspects inside were arrested. But Emma wasn't there. She had already been moved again. Days earlier. Maybe weeks. The trail had gone cold once more. Still, something had changed. For months, investigators had been searching in the dark. Now they finally had a path to follow. They knew Emma had survived the kidnapping. They knew she had been moved from place to place. And most importantly, they knew she had still been alive long after she disappeared. For Linda, that tiny piece of hope became everything. As long as Emma had been alive once, maybe she still was, and somewhere out there, Emma was waiting for someone to find her. 10 months. That's how long Emma had been missing. 10 months without a single confirmed sighting. 10 months of unanswered questions. Most people had stopped believing she'd ever be found alive. Linda never did. She couldn't explain why. Every morning, she still made 2 cups of coffee before realizing Emma wasn't there. Every evening, she still caught herself listening for the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Hope had become painful, but letting go felt impossible. On the afternoon of August 14, 2019, Linda's phone rang. Unknown number. Normally, she ignored calls from numbers she didn't recognize. Since Emma disappeared, strangers had called with fake tips, cruel jokes, and false hope more times than she could count. She almost pressed decline. At the last second, she answered, "Hello." For a moment, there was only silence. Then she heard a voice she hadn't heard in 10 months. "Mom." Linda stopped breathing. Tears filled her eyes instantly. She knew that voice. No mother could ever mistake it. "Emma, I'm here." Linda slid down the kitchen cabinet until she was sitting on the floor. She couldn't stop crying. She couldn't even find the words. Finally, she whispered, "Baby, where are you?" Emma's voice sounded weak, tired, like someone who hadn't slept peacefully in a very long time. "I'm okay," she said.
I'm alive.
Those 2 words shattered 10 months of fear. Linda covered her mouth as she sobbed. "I knew it. I knew you were alive." Emma started crying too. For a few seconds, neither of them could speak. Linda begged her to tell her where she was. "I'll come right now. I don't care how far it is. Just tell me." Emma looked around before answering. "I can't. Not yet." Linda's heart sank. "Why?" "They're still looking for me." Those words sent a chill through her entire body. Emma explained that she had borrowed someone's phone. She couldn't stay in one place for long. If anyone realized she'd made a call, she'd have to disappear again. "I just wanted you to know. I'm trying to come home." Linda closed her eyes. "You don't have to do this alone. We'll find you. I promise." Emma smiled softly. Linda could hear it in her voice. "I know you will." Then, the line went dead. The call had lasted just over 4 minutes. Linda immediately called Detective Reynolds. She could barely get the words out. "She called me. Emma called me." Within minutes, the FBI began tracing the number. The phone had been purchased with cash only days earlier. It belonged to a woman who had no criminal record. Agents found her that same evening. She admitted she'd lent her phone to a frightened young woman who asked to make one quick call. The woman said Emma looked exhausted, scared, thin, but determined. By the time officers arrived, Emma was already gone. Once again, she had slipped away. Even so, that phone call changed everything. For the first time in nearly a year, investigators knew Emma was alive. The search intensified overnight. Every agency involved shared information.
Tips flooded in.
Several members of the trafficking network were arrested. Each arrest uncovered another location, another name, another piece of the puzzle. Slowly, the walls around the organization began to collapse. A week later, an FBI receptionist in Las Vegas noticed a young woman walk through the front door. She wore oversized clothes. Her hair was unwashed. She looked exhausted. The receptionist smiled politely. "Can I help you?" The young woman stood there for a moment, almost as if she wasn't sure this was real. Then she quietly said, "My name is Emma Carter. I think you've been looking for me." The receptionist froze. Within seconds, agents rushed into the lobby. One of them gently guided Emma into a chair. Another called Detective Reynolds. No one asked questions. Not yet. Emma looked like someone who had spent months surviving one day at a time. Right now, she didn't need an interrogation. She needed to know she was finally safe. Hundreds of miles away, Detective Reynolds picked up the phone. Linda answered before it could ring twice. He didn't waste a second. "We found her." Linda closed her eyes. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply whispered, "Thank you." Then she dropped the phone onto the couch and covered her face with both hands. Ryan looked at her from across the room. He already knew. He didn't need to ask. Within 40 minutes, mother and son were driving toward Las Vegas. Neither of them cared how long it would take. They only cared about one thing. After 10 endless months, Emma was finally coming home. The drive from California to Las Vegas felt endless. Linda barely spoke the entire way. She kept staring out the window, replaying the last 10 months in her mind. The unanswered phone calls, the sleepless nights, the birthdays Emma had missed, every terrible possibility she had imagined. Now, she was about to see her daughter again. She still couldn't believe it. Just before sunrise, they arrived at the FBI field office. An agent met them at the entrance. "She's inside." Linda's legs suddenly felt weak. For months she had dreamed about this moment. She had imagined running into Emma's arms. She had imagined crying, screaming, holding her so tightly she'd never let go again. But when the door finally opened, everything became silent. Emma was sitting on a small hospital bed. She looked up. For a second, neither of them moved. Emma looked different. She had lost weight. Dark circles surrounded her eyes. Her smile wasn't the same one Linda remembered, but it was still her daughter. Linda slowly walked across the room. She reached out and gently placed her hand on Emma's face, just to make sure she was real. Emma leaned into her mother's hand. Then she whispered, "I'm home." Linda couldn't hold back anymore. She wrapped both arms around her daughter and cried harder than she ever had in her life. "I thought I'd lost you." Emma held her just as tightly. "I know."
I'm sorry.
"You have nothing to be sorry for." A few minutes later, Ryan quietly stepped into the room. He had spent months trying to stay strong for his mother. Now, he couldn't. The moment he saw Emma, tears rolled down his face. Emma smiled through her own tears. "You got taller." Ryan laughed. "I had to." The three of them stood there holding each other. No speeches. No dramatic music. Just a family that had finally found each other again. Sometimes, the quietest moments carry the most emotion. Doctors examined Emma before allowing her to leave. She was exhausted, malnourished, emotionally drained, but she was alive. That was all Linda cared about. During the drive home, Emma slept almost the entire way. Linda sat beside her in the back seat. She never looked away. Every few minutes she'd reach over and gently touch Emma's arm, just to remind herself this wasn't another dream. Over the next several weeks, investigators slowly learned what had happened. Emma didn't tell her story all at once. Some memories were too painful. Some took months before she could even speak about them. She explained that after being taken from the parking lot, she had been moved several times. Different cities, different people, never staying in one place for very long. At first, she kept trying to escape, but every failed attempt only made things worse. Eventually, she realized survival required patience. She began watching, listening, learning routines. She noticed who became careless, who forgot to lock a door, who got distracted. She waited, not for days, for months, because she knew she might only get one chance. That chance finally came during the summer. One afternoon, someone forgot to secure a back entrance. It stayed unlocked for only a few minutes. For most people, it wouldn't have meant anything. For Emma, it meant everything. She walked out without looking back. She didn't run. Running would attract attention. Instead, she blended into the crowd. She kept walking. One street, then another, then another. She didn't stop until she believed no one was following her. Even then, she still wasn't sure she was free. For several days, Emma avoided crowded places. She trusted no one. Every passing vehicle made her nervous. Every stranger felt like a possible threat. Eventually, she met a woman working at a small diner. The woman noticed Emma looked frightened and hungry. She offered her food without asking questions. For the first time in months, someone treated Emma like a human being instead of a victim. Emma never forgot that kindness. When she finally felt safe enough, she asked if she could borrow a phone. That was the call Linda received, the one that changed everything. Even after returning home, life didn't suddenly go back to normal. Some nights Emma woke up from nightmares. Sometimes she froze when she heard footsteps behind her in a parking lot. Crowded places made her anxious. Simple things like walking to her own car felt impossible. Healing wasn't something that happened in a few weeks. It became a journey she had to take one day at a time. Through counseling, through the love of her family, and through people who reminded her she wasn't alone, Emma slowly began rebuilding the life that had been stolen from her. She knew the memories would never completely disappear, but she also knew something else. The people who took 10 months of her life had failed to take the rest of it. And for the first time since that October evening, she finally believed her future belonged to her again. Emma spent the next year helping investigators. Every interview brought back painful memories. Every courtroom appearance forced her to face the people who had stolen nearly a year of her life. It wasn't easy, but she kept showing up, because she knew she wasn't fighting only for herself anymore. She was fighting for every woman who never got the chance to come home. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered the full extent of the trafficking network. More than a dozen people were arrested across several states. Some had helped transport victims. Others had provided safe houses. A few had spent years believing they would never be caught. They were wrong. One by one, the network collapsed. At the center of it all stood Daniel Brooks, the man who had watched parking lots, studied routines, and treated innocent lives like they meant nothing. The trial lasted for weeks. The courtroom was packed almost every day. Reporters filled the back rows. Families of other victims sat quietly, hoping justice would finally arrive. When Daniel entered the courtroom, he never looked toward Emma. He showed no emotion.
No regret. No apology.
It was as if none of it had ever mattered to him. Emma refused to let that intimidate her. When it was her turn to speak, she walked to the witness stand with steady hands. The room became completely silent. She looked directly at the jury. Then she began. I've been asked many times what I lost. People expect me to talk about the months I was gone. But that's not what hurts the most. She paused. What hurts is everything that should have happened during those months. The birthdays, the family dinners, the phone calls to my mom after work, the ordinary days that I'll never get back. She looked toward Daniel for the first time. You didn't just try to steal my future. You stole my normal life. But you didn't win. I'm still here, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving you failed. Not a single person in the courtroom spoke. Several jurors quietly wiped away tears. A few days later, the verdict was announced. Guilty on every major charge. Kidnapping, human trafficking, conspiracy, multiple federal offenses. Daniel Brooks was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He left the courtroom the same way he had entered, without saying a single word. For Linda, the sentence didn't erase the pain. It didn't give back the 10 months her daughter had lost. But it meant one thing. Daniel Brooks would never hurt another family again. Not every family received the ending Linda did. Several of the missing women connected to the case were rescued during later investigations. Others were never found alive. She often sat quietly beside the families, saying very little, because after everything she'd lived through, she understood that some pain doesn't need advice. It only needs someone willing to sit beside you. Life slowly moved forward. Emma didn't return to the dental clinic. Too many memories waited in that parking lot. Instead, she started over in another city. She found a new job, a new apartment, a new routine. It wasn't about forgetting. It was about learning how to live again. She also began speaking at events for organizations that helped survivors of human trafficking. She never shared every detail of what happened. Some memories remained hers alone, but she always ended her talks the same way. If you're waiting for life to feel exactly the way it did before, it probably never will. But different doesn't mean hopeless. You can survive. You can heal. And one day, you'll smile without forcing it. Linda eventually retired from her job. Instead of staying home, she volunteered with organizations that helped families of missing people. Whenever another mother called in tears, Linda answered. She never made promises. She never gave false hope. She simply listened, because she knew what it felt like to sit beside a silent phone, wondering if it would ever ring again. Ryan finished college a few years later. His sister's disappearance changed him forever. He chose a career in law enforcement. People often asked why. His answer was always simple. Because someone never gave up looking for my sister. I want to be that person for someone else. Years have passed since Emma sent one ordinary text message. Leaving work now. I'll be home soon. A message so simple, so ordinary, yet it changed everything. Sometimes people think life changes because of huge moments. But often, it changes in 40 seconds. The 40 seconds between locking your office door and reaching your car. The 40 seconds someone decides to make a terrible choice. Or the 40 seconds someone notices something isn't right and decides to speak up. Those moments matter, more than we realize. Today, Emma is living the quiet life she once thought she'd lost forever. She still calls her mother almost every evening. Not because she has to, because they both know how precious those ordinary conversations really are. And every time Linda sees her daughter's name appear on her phone, she smiles. Because she remembers the night she thought she'd never see it again. Sometimes the happiest endings aren't about revenge. They're about getting another chance at the life you almost lost. Thank you for watching. If the story moved you, share it with someone you care about. You never know whose awareness could make a difference one day. And remember, no matter how ordinary today feels, never take the people waiting for you at home for granted.